The Helsinki region has been inhabited for millennia, as proven by the Bronze Age burial mound in Kulosaari. Yet Gustav Vasa founded Helsinki as a city in 1550. Russia conquered Finland in 1808 and made Helsinki the capital of the Grand Duchy of Finland, a region within the country, and Finland finally gained independence in 1917. Now, Helsinki actually has a somewhat dark foundation, with parts of the city built on old cemeteries. As an example, Senate Square stands on land originally occupied by Ulrika Eleonora Church and its churchyard. The park beside Old Church on Boulevardy was originally a burial ground for plague victims in 1710. And with such a lengthy history, it's bound to have a few ghost stories and legends, isn't it? Well, that is what we're going to have a look at in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there, and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult, and just a bit weird. I'm your host, Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author, and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. I do hope that you are well, and I also hope that you're looking forward to our theme this month, and we're going to have a look at European city legends this time. So we're not just sticking to ghost stories like I did the last time I did European cities. We are looking at different types of folklore as well as ghosts, just to make things a little bit more interesting. Like I did last time when I did European cities, I am focusing on the cities that I've personally visited. So obviously when people make requests for cities, if it's not one that I've been to, it makes it a lot more difficult to include. So this time we're going to be having a look at Helsinki, which I visited in July last year, and I absolutely loved it as well. One of the things I found a bit difficult when I was researching this episode was that there's lots of short snippets about the legends, but there's not enough information to then give the ghost sort of a sense of purpose or context. So I've chosen examples where we've got a little bit more to go on about the story. And before I forget, this week's episode is brought to you by chamomile, which meant energy in adversity in the Victorian language of flowers, which I thought was quite a nice one for this episode. But like I say, we are doing Helsinki. And like I say, I found it an absolutely fabulous place to visit when I was there. Really enjoyed it and really highly recommend it. And before we start, I just wanted to add a little quick note that obviously because these are legends to do with ghosts, as always with these kind of stories, you do have tales of violence, or people meet unhappy ends, or people unalive themselves and things. So if any of those topics will be too much for you, then obviously feel free to just skip this episode. So we're going to start off with the story of the headless colonel, and he apparently haunts the building on the corner of Vironkatu and Meritulinkatu in the Kruunenhaaka district. Now known as Alexei, he apparently uses the lift while carrying his head, either in his hands or under his arm. And I suppose if you don't like lifts at the best of times, that would be really rather a rubbish person to have in the lift with you. But people also hear him talking in apparently empty rooms, and he also announces his presence with both an oppressive atmosphere and heavy footsteps. Now, according to legend, he was actually a Russian Marine officer who lived in the building in the early 1900s, but he hanged himself after discovering his wife with another man when he returned from a trip. Some say he did this in the building's attic. Later, Alexei's ghost took umbrage with a female resident who hated coming home alone at night. Alexei would knock on the walls and windows all night long, eventually driving her away. Now, the building later became part of the University of Helsinki, and a woman staying overnight actually saw a tall man in officer's clothing just walk through the bathroom door, and apparently he vanished when she panicked, which I imagine most people would panic if they saw someone walk through a closed door, but there we go. And university researchers work in the building now, and apparently Alexei likes nosing through their papers, so people will come back to find their papers in disarray. Now, he's called the Headless Colonel because of the fact that he's seen carrying his own head, but he is also sometimes seen with his head on his shoulders, and apparently when he does this, he wears a peaked cap. So I don't know when the most recent sighting of him was, but a lot of the sightings do seem to be actually quite consistent. And he seems now, because there's not people living there, he does seem a lot less malevolent than he perhaps maybe was. He just seems a little bit more curious than he was. So if anyone's been to that building, obviously then please do let me know if that is something that people actually have any kind of worry about. And now we're going to go on to probably my favourite part of this episode, and that's the haunted theatres. And many cities do feature stories of haunted theatres, and in fact I have obviously done various haunted theatres on the podcast before. So obviously one of the most famous, I think, is the Man in Grey at London's Drury Lane Theatre, and there's an episode on that. Newcastle has grey ladies in 2 of our theatres, and I've got an episode on that. And we also have stories of things like stagehands who died in accidents and so on. But not to be outdone, Helsinki boasts 3 haunted theatres, which I did go looking for 2 of them, I must admit, so I do have videos of them. But the first one we're going to have a look at is the Alexander Theatre, and this was built in 1879, and it was actually commissioned by Nikolai Alderberg, who was the Governor-General of Finland at the time, and the intended audience was the Russian garrison. Both the National Theatre and the National Opera actually moved here in 1918, which also explains its old nickname of the Old Opera House. But its ghost isn't local, and that's what makes this one really interesting, because people actually believe that the ghost came from the building that provided the bricks for the theatre. And that building was the Bomarsund fortress in the Åland Islands bombed in the Crimean War. So the builders reused its bricks in the Alexander Theatre, and people think that the ghost actually came with them, which is quite cool because I've never really come across that necessarily before. But some sources claim that the ghost, who was apparently a soldier, enjoyed opera, so that was quite fortuitous for him really. But staff know that he's around because apparently he opens doors on his own. Other stories include a director feeling a hand on his back during a rehearsal but then finding no one there when he turned around. Children practicing ballet once saw army boots just hanging in midair, which understandably frightened them. An actor noticed an electrician in the balcony who seemed to be moving in a really odd fashion. So then when he actually looked up at the electrician, he realised that yes, he was moving in an odd fashion because he was floating and he was also blue. So I imagine that would probably stick in your mind as well. But perhaps the most grandiose of all happened during a play based on the story of Aladdin, because when the director and the producer were chatting after one of the performances, they complimented the actor playing the genie. And when one of them said "genie in the lamp," a chandelier lamp crashed to the floor beside them. Now, one theory is that genie and spirit are similar in Finnish, and then the ghost basically got confused or upset. But I just hope he doesn't mind that the opera company actually moved out in 1993. The next theatre we're going to move on to is the Finnish National Theatre, and this one's just round from the train station. And built in 1902, it boasts apparently at least 6 ghosts. A grey lady wanders the theatre looking for her script, and she wears a grey robe which you would think would make her difficult to identify, but some sources did name her as Ida Ahlberg, although other people say that her identity is unknown. She's also described as a white lady depending on the article, so I wasn't really sure if the theatre actually has a grey lady and a white lady, or if it's just got both, and it depends on what light you see her in. I don't know, but the fact that she seems to be looking for a script does imply that it's the same figure. People have apparently spotted the ghost of Berta Lindberg on the main stage or in the women's changing room, and actors and stagehands have run into Carlo Bergholm backstage, and they've also encountered Hjalmar Rinne on the small stage as well. Actor Arne Leppänen is also believed to haunt the theatre, and he appeared at the theatre between 1916 and 1937 until he retired due to ill health. Now, he actually died in July 1937, shortly after he retired, so his appearances at the theatre to me kind of make sense that perhaps he decided to return to where he was happiest. The final ghost is probably the most notorious, and this is Urho Sommersalmi, and people have actually seen him sitting in the director's stall, but quite annoyingly he vanishes whenever he's spotted. Now, he's most notorious simply because of what happened, because in 1962 he killed his wife for 50 years with an axe, and ironically the Finnish Actors Union had given him the axe as a gift. He then took his own life and, according to legend, still wanders the theatre holding the axe. It's interesting where he's concerned that there is such a story attached to him that at least, people can actually identify that particular ghost, whereas other ones it's a bit like, is it a grey lady? Is it a white lady? Not really sure. He's very, very definite and very easy to recognise with this axe. And obviously mentioning grey and white ladies, the final theatre is the Svenska Theatre or Swedish Theatre, and they don't just have white ladies and grey ladies, they've got 4 female ghosts who wear white, grey, turquoise and black. And I absolutely love the idea of a turquoise lady, because I know there are green ladies, which I've covered before, but they're often closer to fairy type spirits. But the idea of a turquoise lady, I just think that's absolutely fabulous. I love that so much. There's also 3 male ghosts who wear white, grey and black, and apparently the man in black gets angry if the theatre hosts a production of Axel. The general belief is that apparently he may have been someone who auditioned for a role and didn't get it, but who knows. For some reason he just really doesn't like that play. None of the articles I looked at seem to know who the ghosts actually are. They're just identified by the colours that they wear. So it does rather sound like they're reprising some of their parts that they've played at the theatre. But as I say, that turquoise lady, I absolutely love her. I just think that is such a cool idea. But we're going to move away from theatres now, because as I say, I love the fact that these 3 theatres have these ghosts, and they have so many of them as well. It just really seemed like an interesting facet of Helsinki folklore, really. But we're going to move on to another ghost story, and this one in a way is kind of sweet. I think it's quite sweet, and this is the Burger's house. So in the 1800s, the Kruunenhaaka district was made up of wooden houses, and I must admit, I noticed that when I was in Turku in Finland, the fact that the wooden house construction is really quite similar across different parts of these different cities and things. Now, the only one of these wooden houses left in Helsinki is the Burger's house, and it's actually the oldest surviving wooden house in the city. And it's named for Burger Alexander Wickholm, who bought it in 1859, and he actually oversaw Helsinki's fire brigade. But one of his favourite pastimes was sitting on a rock in the garden, which I just think is really quite lovely, just kind of sitting, watching the world go by. It's all good. But given he was so fond of it, his family then thought, oh, well, we'll put it at his grave when he died, and then he'll still have the stone with him. But it seems that Wickholm didn't agree with that, and there was all these weird disturbances at the house apparently once they'd moved his rock. So eventually someone was like, maybe we should just move the rock back. So they put it back in the garden, and all of a sudden the disturbances stopped. So I quite like that. And apparently some people say that you can still see him sitting on the stone either at sunset or after dark. I don't know why I find that story quite sweet. I just love the fact that he's such a creature of habit that he wants his rock left where it was so he can continue to sit on it. It doesn't seem to bother anyone as long as the rock is left where it is as well. So I just think that that's quite a lovely little story, really. It wouldn't really be an episode from me without a graveyard. And obviously when I went to Finland, I must admit, I was looking at what to do in Helsinki. So I was like, I'll have a look, see what's on. Oh my God, they've got this amazing, huge cemetery. I've got to go and see it. And I'm probably going to mispronounce the name, but I think it's the Heiteniemi Cemetery. And established in 1829, it is well worth a visit. It's absolutely massive. It's so big, but it's also really, really beautiful. And I actually saw red squirrels playing among the trees, which was amazing because I've never actually seen red squirrels in the UK, but I saw them in Finland, so that's good. But one of the things that makes it really beautiful is that in a lot of places where I've been to cemeteries, and there are quite a few, people will leave either cut flowers or like fake posies at graves. Whereas in Helsinki, people actually plant plants, and then they just continue to grow, and then people maintain the plants so the graves feel well tended, but they also look really gorgeous as well. Really, really loved it. One of them was just covered in ferns, and I love ferns, so I was like, that is amazing. But anyway, that was just a side issue. That's not part of the folklore. I just thought it was cool. But traditionally, Finns apparently visit their loved ones' graves on the 1st of November, and they buy havu, or bundles of branches, to lay on the graves, and they also light candles as well. And as you might expect, there are rumours of ghosts wandering the cemetery in the middle of the night. Some people claim that they've heard whispering, and there's one particular legend claims that the dead leave their graves on the dark moon and then steal the souls from anyone who gets too close to the cemetery. Although I would actually imagine there'd be much more specific stories had that actually happened. But it was really funny because I went looking and all I could find was people talking about how beautiful the cemetery was. And it is. And I was like, oh, I really want to include it. And then when I found that bit about the rumours of ghosts, I thought that'll have to do. It's not the most spectacular folklore associated with cemeteries. I mean, you're going some to try and top the cemeteries in Glasgow and obviously Highgate in London, I think. But yeah, I just thought I wanted to include that because it is so pretty. And we're going to finish with a building that isn't haunted, as far as I can tell, but it would be absolutely worth seeing because its exterior links so much to folklore. And this is the Pohjola Insurance Building, and that is on Alexander and Katu as well. So you can always go and see it if you're in Helsinki. I'm kicking myself that I didn't go to see it, but there we go. And architect Eliel Saarinen designed the building in 1901, and the doors, windowsills and moulding all feature carved stone creatures. And even the name Pohjola refers to a mythical region to the north featured in the Finnish epic poem The Kalevala. Now, Elias Lönnrot actually compiled and edited the first edition of the Kalevala in 1835 after collecting folk poems around Finland and Karelia. And these poems are part of a song tradition that actually existed among speakers of the Balto-Finnic languages for about 2,000 years. So it's really, really important for kind of how it collects all of these things together. And its publication also helped to bring Finnish language and culture to new audiences. And then a second edition of the Kalevala came along in 1849, and that's the one that you usually get translations of even now. So it's really, really important as a work of literature. And we often kind of have people talking about things like, you know, the Old English epics like the likes of Beowulf, and then of course you've got the Welsh literature like the Mabinogi and so on. And I really do feel like not enough people mention the Kalevala as well. So I just wanted to put that in there. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, I highly recommend going and having a look at it. But this building then just basically has all these mouldings and everything on the outside that references this, which I think is so cool. But the reason why Pohjola is important is a powerful woman named Luhi ruled the area, and some people actually thought that you could find the world tree's roots in Pohjola as well. So the decoration of trees and squirrels and other creatures all make sense on that particular building because of its link with this folklore and so on and literature. And I just think it looks amazing in the photos, so I really wish I'd gone to see it, but I got really distracted. Now, Helsinki is a beautiful city, like I say, that is well worth a visit, because when I was there, as well as the cemetery, I also went to the design museum, because obviously in my day job I do teach graphic design, and if you pass in, I would say pop in, because they have the silver necklace that Princess Leia wears at the end of A New Hope when she's handing out the medals, so that was quite cool to see. And I hadn't realised quite how much of everyday design objects are actually Finnish, so that was cool. And then I also went to see the observatory as well, which is great for all things astronomy and space. It is quite small, but it is a really nice way to spend an hour or so, and you can get to touch a piece of asteroid as well, which is not something that you can do everywhere. But I think despite how clean, friendly and just generally welcoming Helsinki is, remember these kind of stories when it starts to get dark. And especially keep them in mind if you go to any of the theatres, and if you see the turquoise lady at the Svenska Theatre, I'm going to want a photo of that. But pay attention to that brief pat on your back, or the movement out the corner of your eye. Perhaps you've just met a theatre legend and didn't even realise. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode about Helsinki's ghost stories and folklore and so on. If you have read the Kalevala as well, please do feel free to let me know and let me know what you thought of it. That would be cool as well. And next week we're going to head off to Vienna, which I absolutely love Vienna, and there's quite a lot of interesting stories about Vienna, shall we say, so we will be doing that. And then the week after that's going to be Strasbourg. I haven't decided on the final week yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards Milan, but I'll have to double check to see if there's actually enough legends to sustain a whole episode. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next week when we go to Vienna. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.